Alright guys, so I'm normally a pretty high refresh rate type of gamer. But if we jump into this, my frame rate counter's in the bottom left corner, and you'll see that it's around 30. And this isn't, there's other parts of the game that might be slightly more demanding, but there's also ones that are a lot less demanding than this. There's a lot of people here. I happen to be in this scene in my playthrough, but it's also a good demonstration of an area that highlights something. A lot of this game is about the atmosphere. It's about walking around, having conversations, long conversations, right? And it's kind of, in these sorts of situations, do I really need to be above 60 frames per second? So originally I started playing the game on a mixture of high settings with a few things turned off and a little bit of DLSS to stay well above 60 in most situations, and at least in the 50s in the more demanding ones. But this, well, let me show you what I'm at here. So again, this is Ray Tracing Ultra. The DLSS is the one compromised here. It's set to auto, which I'm pretty sure is selecting the balanced mode. Because when I've tested this, and I'll just show you, if I go to the balanced mode, it's going to give me the same frame rates, right? These are the same frame rates I was getting when it was set to auto. So I'm fairly certain that auto is selected balanced on my system. Maybe that would automatically select something else on your system. And I do notice some glitches. Like if we look at these straight lines, things like that in the floor, sometimes in motion, sometimes if you get at a certain angle, they get a little bit of a shimmer to them, a little bit of aliasing that I don't think is supposed to be there if we turn DLSS off. But I mean, watch what happens if we turn DLSS off. Okay, guys. My frame rate, hopefully the recording doesn't crash. Like, it turns into a slideshow. Yeah, we're down in the 14, 15 frame per second range. So I am doubling my frame rate by turning it on with the DLSS. So this would be utterly unplayable, okay? So basically, what I'm getting at here is I could turn everything on with a compromise of balanced DLSS, which is what auto seems to be selecting. And it looks pretty good with a little bit of the DLSS glitches, and I can hit the 30 frames per second mark. And I've got to say, it's, surprisingly playable until I hit combat. Now, the reason why I decided I might actually keep these settings is because of this. And tell me if I'd be absolutely crazy to do this. So if I happen to jump into combat, I can go to settings, click ray tracing off, and here we go. I'm now 60 frames per second, and I could have nice smooth combat. The graphics are still really good, right? They're still really good. But, like I said, I could have smooth combat, and then when the combat section of the game is over, I can just pop back in here, go to settings, kick that eye candy back on, and pop back out. Takes a second, I've noticed, for the ray tracing to sort of process again. But yeah, then it's back. And I haven't tested this out throughout the entire city yet, but I have noticed that in the areas I've been, and like places like this aren't the least demanding ever. I know there's big open world areas as well. This has looked pretty dang good, right? The lighting is awesome, and honestly, it looks pretty good on the ultra settings as well without ray tracing. So, I don't know, guys. This is a tough decision, but I'm pretty tempted right now to actually play this game at 30 frames per second. And when I hit combat, to bump it up. Let's pop outside for a minute and see what it looks like if I'm outside. So notice that if I'm outside, I actually stay in the mid 30s. Obviously, there are these slightly more populated areas of the city where it could bring me some more problems. But notice things like the ray traced reflections, like the reflection of that billboard in the water there. You can actually see the billboard itself and the writing on it and things like that. So once again, this feels pretty smooth. Now, if I drop down to actually 30 or below, like below 30, I notice that I can't stand it. But for some reason, 35, I think it's because of the mouse latency. If I drop any lower than this, like if I try setting it to DLSS quality instead of balanced, I'm going to lose just enough frames that I actually can't stand it. Things become... Now, that's just processing for a second. It's going to come back up. Okay, there. So I've lost, what is this, 5, 6 frames? But I notice a huge difference. Now, this might not pick up in the recording. And remember, by the way, when you're comparing all of these graphics, YouTube has compression, so you're not seeing quite the same thing I am. But what you really can't tell is my mouse latency. When I move my mouse, I can tell enough of a latency when I move it, between when I move it and when the screen moves, right? At these settings, that I absolutely can't stand this. I might be able to tolerate it with a controller, but honestly, probably not. But it's surprising what a difference that extra 5 or 6 frames I get by going to the balanced mode does in terms of how it actually feels. Now give this a second to process. Okay, so now it's back to about it was, where it's more like the lower mid-30s. And for some reason, that has a big enough difference on the input latency on my mouse movements that this doesn't feel awful. You just get a bit of choppiness when you move, like compared to if we were at 60. So once again, let's drop this to just normal ultra settings. Basically, just turn the ray tracing off, right? So I get into combat, I pop over to ray tracing, I kick off. Things still look really good. It's definitely noticeably snappier and smoother. Man, this is such a hard decision. I honestly want your guys' feedback. Would I be insane to switch between these, or should I just play it at this, right? This still looks really good with no ray tracing. The reflections still look good, but I mean, like, you're not getting the actual reflection of the billboard, like, in a readable level. I know some people don't like the too shiny of reflections. They feel like, maybe everything looks too shiny. But I think that it looks pretty good myself. It can be a personal preference thing. But yeah, would I be absolutely insane to play the game like this, where I'm just popping in here and turning ray tracing on if I'm just kind of in an atmospheric walk through the city, take in the scenery, take in the reflections, and then, oh man, some guy's shooting at me. Click this button real quick, and we're off to the fight, Would that be the worst way to play the game or the best way to play the game? What should I do, guys? What do you think? Let me know in the comment sections. I really actually want feedback on this. Am I utterly insane right now? Because normally I would never tolerate a game below 50 frames per second. I just can't do it usually. But for some reason, I don't know. The way this game builds the atmosphere, I think one of the nicest things about this game is its art direction, its atmosphere, the scenery, and I've found that in these mid-30s, it's tolerable as long as I don't need any combat, which I'm shocked to say. I haven't played a game in the 30 frames per second range in I don't even know how many years. But yeah, I mean, just the reflections, a little bit better lighting and shadows. It does add something, guys. It does add something. And I'm not usually a ray tracing, advocate. I think it's cool, but I hate what it does to your frame rate. But, if I'm just going to be taking this leisurely stroll through the city, is it worth it, guys? Is it worth it? I don't know. All right, I better stop recording this thing. I'm just kind of rambling on now at this point. I hope you guys have an excellent day.